The second one actually kicked out an amazing number of products. That is, that they have a decent, up-to-date README that actually starts with a short, human-readable description of what the bloody product is supposed to do. Most of them start with a doc test or something else completely incomprehensible, or they just assume that you already know what it's doing. That's not very helpful. So we were like, please, people, if you write add-on products, spend like a few minutes and write a paragraph on what is the problem that this is supposed to solve.
And make sure your restructured text compiles. Make sure your restructured text actually compiles.
Yeah, that also helps. It must have a public source repository, otherwise it's out. If it can't be found and it's somewhere locked up, that's not the point of what we're about. It must be ready to be translated. We're not expecting the mostly English-speaking world to suddenly start speaking languages. That would be a bit too much to ask, but at least we expect of even English and American developers to have the infrastructure in place to allow it to be translated. It must be released on PyPy for more technical people. And, well, we can add something more here, but this was what we came up with. And to win in a certain category, we came up with nice extra to have. Being up to date with the latest Plone release, 4.3 now. Having screenshots. Having a screencast wins you bonus points. And you can actually automate that now for the techies with a robot framework. So if you update your tests bravely and nicely, you will get a screencast for free. Wow. It must have an issue tracker. It must have end-user documentation as well as integrated documentation if your product interacts with end users. It should be translated in a few languages to see that your language infrastructure actually works. And what we would really like to see and what wins in the products list is if you link to real-life uses. That can sometimes be difficult because some products are usually on intranets, but sometimes if you know your product is used somewhere, put a link somewhere so people can see it's an actual production. And it's even better if other people have reviewed it or blogged about it and said, like, this is a great product, we're using it such and such. That wins you brownie points. It should be tested, obviously. You might ask why we didn't put this in the required category, because we were actually focusing on integrators. Maybe you shouldn't use untested products at all, but that decision is up to the integrator. Sometimes you're sort of like, I just cannot test myself, I cannot write myself, and some products are just, yeah. So we said they're in the nice to have, we're not going to put that in the required category. It raises the bar, I think, too high for new add-on developers who should learn to write tests, but our documentation on how to write tests should also be improved. And you can't expect people to do that right at the very first add-on, unfortunately. Bonus points for Travis integration, for build-out examples, for having your dependencies explained, both in the code but also in your description, so that people just testing it out who can't read the code, but integrators testing it out suddenly don't pull down the entire internet as a dependency. It should be actively maintained by more than one person to get over the hit by a bus problem. And we can add more suggestions here. And this is, of course, not a brand new idea. Yeah, maybe you have other criteria that you would like to. But this was the idea there, and then we had a lot of fun actually making a product shortlist. This is probably way too small to sort of read for you all, but that's why we're having a panel. We will name some products. You can go and read this later and add your favorites. And at a certain time, we want to see how we can continue this. Probably there will be more discussion at EuroPython. And at some point, we want to do a online sort of curation of this and have the winners festively crowned in Brasilia. That was sort of our initial plan. And I'll give way to the panel. Or I'm part of the panel.
I think you're part of the panel.
Oh, shit. So our panel discussion is, well, let's kick off with, do you think this is a good idea?
That is an absolutely great idea. So I'll go ahead and start there. Yes.
Don't
yes.
talk to me, talk to the microphone.
I'll say yes, this is a wonderful idea. I think as a newcomer to Plone, sometimes you may run into add-ons in the product section that may look attractive to use, may seem like they solve your problem, but then you install them into your site, and then all of a sudden you're in a world of hurt because those people didn't do things the right way, according to basically what everything Paul just went over. So establishing at least an awareness of the right way to do things. For example, if it feels like you're doing something wrong, you probably are, and you should stop right there at that point in time. So I think bringing awareness to the fact that making high-quality add-ons and making sure they're maintained, and then also making sure that you've kind of gotten it feels almost like a certification, even though it's not anything official, is definitely a good list to go to first, so you don't get burned by, like, some people only have a production site and just install these into their sites willy-nilly, and I fear for those people.
Right, just to pick up on what Calvin said, I do think this list is a fantastic idea for all of those reasons. I mean, the total list of Plone add-ons is absurdly long. Many of those add-ons were put in there as experimental code, as demonstrations to other people. They were meant as starting points to other people. They may no longer be applicable. So this is, refining that is a really great place to start. However, I want to issue a caution to all of you that here who may be looking at that list, which looks like a wonderful candy store of fantastic things. Only install on a production Plone site what you absolutely need and have some kind of plan for maintaining. And as Calvin said, of course, test out of production first before you ever install anything. But really, when it comes to add-on products, in general, less is more. Add as few as possible. Always ask yourself if Plone's functionality can be just used a different way and achieve the same effect. You'll be much happier the next time you upgrade.
I just want to add on to that real quick that I think Plone has a huge advantage here because that advice that Steve just gave applies to not just Plone, but like if you're using WordPress, Drupal, whatever, the benefit I think Plone has is that its power out of the box has so many things that with Drupal you have to install add-ons to get that functionality like workflow or a WYSIWYG editor, where now you're dependent on those third-party people keeping those things up to date. And so we have a head start on most of that is that the core Plone you're guaranteed is going to upgrade, is going to work, is going to survive migrations, where the add-ons, there's, it's kind of all bets are off. It'd be nice if they supported that, but you don't want to get locked into a specific version of Plone just because your third-party add-on doesn't magically upgrade and work.
And when I say to explore what you can do with Plone first, I mean, check the current version, really figure out if something new might solve a problem that you've been sitting on since Plone 2.5, because a lot has changed. Also, look at the list of add-on products that come already with Plone that aren't turned on. For example, the Placeful Workflow add-on, shipped with Plone, well supported, well known by the community. It adds complexity, so it's not turned on in advance, but it can solve a lot of problems for you.
Check in, check out also.
Yeah.
I would also say when you're testing them, make sure to test the uninstall, just to see what happens when you do uninstall it, what it leaves behind, and if it does leave stuff behind, how easy is it to deal with that. Sometimes they'll leave something behind, but it's not a big deal. It's just something in the JavaScript or CSS registry you can just remove from there. So that's not a big deal, but if it blows up your site, that's kind of a big deal.
Right. And beware of things that seem magic, because those are exactly the ones that are going to be a problem. I mean, just it's a name that frequently comes up in the community is a bad example, and it's unfortunate because the people who worked on it worked really hard and it was wonderful at the time, is anything beginning Plone for Artists.
I was going to bring this up in the discussion. There are lots of bad P4A things that we've kind of been left with just because they were unmaintained, but there's other things that we've picked up, and the community still does maintain, like the P4A subtyper.
Yes.
And that's dependent for a couple other packages here and there, and I think actually it got a bad rap just for the first 3 letters of its package namespace.
Okay, should we maybe just name a few products? I can start with some that are basically on my standard list. I'll just I mean, there are some obvious candidates like Plone FormGen and whatever that most people put. But I, for instance, I couldn't live, I think, without EEA tags, which is just a small plugin that creates autocomplete keywords, which is just the way to go. There have been so many keywords widgets in Plone, and they all basically sucked. As soon as you have more than a few hundred keywords, it just doesn't scale. You need autocomplete on everything. Your content editors will be very grateful for that. Another really simple one that I hope one day should go into core is, what is it called? Reject Anonymous. Great, thank you, then it can go off this list. It's a tiny thing that basically flips a switch and says, this is an intranet, you're not welcome here unless you log in, and I don't have to do complicated workflow stuff. I can just keep the normal workflow, but it just rejects anybody who isn't logged in. Brilliant. I'll go out on a limb and say that I use something that some people snigger about, that is Plomino. It is a huge code base. It is one of those products that come with the kitchen sink. On the other hand, it sure beats having 75 Excel files flying around your organization where people fill in little expenses accounts and other things. And if you actually have the luxury of a secretary who ever worked with Plomino, Domino, it is a lifesaver because she can crank out those applications faster than I can think. So in some use cases, even I always advocate like have the small products, but sometimes if you have to choose between a large, complicated, but maintained product and having to deal with a million disparate little things that people do because your intranet doesn't do it, like subscribing to things or writing little web applications, it works. And I am an immense fan of most of the EEA stuff. They've now come with a new one, which is EEA Depiction, which actually gives you nice shiny logos on all your MIME types. So a PDF actually has a big shiny bright PDF logo, a Word file has a big shiny bright Word logo, and it just makes life so much nicer. That would be my random suggestions.
I think a lot of the ones I would suggest we've put into the Plone demo site, and the ones I want to kind of highlight would be like things like Blogstar. One of the reasons I like the Blogstar package is a collection of 3 or 4 other actually eggs it brings in, but it allows you to do blogging on Plone really, really simply without having to add in custom content types. It leverages a lot of the existing infrastructure and kind of works in a Plone way, which I think is really important because if you uninstall it, your content's still there. It's still just pages, images, files. You haven't uninstalled all the content. You may have just taken away a functionality, and now you can shift to something else really easily. So I like that one because it stays out of your way. The other ones we put into that site, I was going to say, like, I also like the placeable workflow. It ships with Plone, and it's very solid, and it solves that problem of being able to have an intranet and an extranet in basically one site really, really simply. That's a really important use case for a lot of smaller organizations where they want to have a private area where they can share amongst their own collaborators. It's just a checkbox away for anyone who just installs Plone right now, which is pretty amazing.
Right. I completely agree on that. And one of the things that it can do for you is it can keep you from having to complicate workflow. Mm-hmm. Because if you can, you don't want all your workflow visible everywhere if you've got a complicated situation. Also, if your workflow is even remotely complicated, you can get a little piece of the future by installing Plone app workflow.
Workflow manager.
Workflow manager, sorry. It's right in front of me and I left off the end anyway. It's there are a few add-ons that are extremely likely to become part of core going into the future, and you can get a taste of that future and you can use them now, and also thus have a very high likelihood that you're not on a slippery slope. But workflow is one of Plone's great features. You know, you never want to overcomplicate it, but Plone App Workflow Manager brings the management of your workflows, the creation of them, the switching of them to handle situations into Plone proper, and gives you visualizations of how it works. So great work, Nathan. Another piece of the future, let's see, wild card folder contents.
Yep.
I mean, put it on your sites. Your content managers will love you for it, because
Yes.
all of a sudden they're going to be able to drag and drop content with trivial ease into folders, present their folders in different orders. It's, in all my experiments, very solid.
I love this. I'm finding about add-ons I've never checked out either. So.
Yeah, so, by the way, those last two, Nathan is the principal author, just wonderful work. Thank you, Nathan.
I guess, what are some other ones? Content well portlets are something we always put on sites. That's a nice one. You can just add a bunch of extra portlets to the various sections of the site.
Ooh. Contentious.
You don't like that one?
No, it has, in my opinion, the worst user interface in history, and since we now have collective cover, why bother?
Sure.
But, I mean,
Oh, yeah, let's
the
mention
list is
collective
open
cover.
for discussion.
Yeah, collective cover. I haven't actually installed it on a site anywhere, but
I have it
looks
live
really
running,
nice.
and it's brilliant. But that's just my opinion. But, I mean, the criteria should be objective. But, yeah, you have more?
Sure. Document Viewer is another one that we wrote, and it gives you this really nice viewer of PDFs, Word documents, and any kind of document type, really. Has a lot of OS level dependencies that can be tricky to install, but if you can get that working, it works really nice. We have it deployed on some very large sites.
Yeah, I don't know if we want to have like audience participation. It's probably, you can't probably read all the 50 ones that are there, or there's more than 50 on there. We want to have a whole collection and then chuck out enough until we end with 50. So we can have some suggestions from the audience here, if you
I had a
like.
question for the audience. Who here in the audience has written an add-on product for Plone? Okay, so we got quite a few
I
people.
think we are speaking to the choir.
Yeah, well, but okay, that actually kind of leads me into the next thing. Is an area I'd like to cover would be who here would write. Who are the people who didn't raise their hands would write an add-on if it was easier to put it in Plone.org, put it on PyPy, and made that process simpler. Like who's interested in writing more of these kinds of things? Okay,
Few.
who here is not using yarn.makerelease?
The people using Zest Releaser.
Yeah, okay. I mean, these kinds of tools make this just so trivial to satisfy quite a few of the number of the bullet points that are on Paul's list there, or the list that was come up at the blog there. Easing that process of getting something distributed, properly versioned, just make sure that when new versions of Plone come out, those add-ons are going to get updated quickly. So if you guys are using all the right tool sets and all the right, magic.
But if you're going to create a new one, make sure there's not something similar that does kind of close to what you're doing already, because we don't need more duplicates of functionality. Try to contribute to an existing one if...
But the reason I am also very excited about this whole initiative and this list is that this is for once not about the developers. Yes, the add-on developers should try to stick to all these criteria, but this is for us, the integrators. Yes, we get a say in this. We make the short list more or less because we have to integrate them. We can judge how useful they are. So if there are integrators here, we are always sort of like, ooh, we're not quite developers, but we have to use your stuff. This is your chance to be heard. Send in your suggestions. I'm sure we will try to get a sort of like multi-national and multi-vertical market team together to make the final selection, like a jury. If you're interested in helping in that, we want to try to get people who are where integrating is all they do in their life, but we also want people where integrating is a small part of their job description, and they are even under more time stress. They have to see like, I have to select a product in about 3 hours maximum because that's all I get this week. We want you also to be on that jury. So if people want to be on that jury, contact me through email or whatever. We want to make sure that we want to spread this out a bit evenly across continents, so we'll also be reaching out to people in Latin America, Europe, Australia, Africa, and wherever. And the jury is all a bit fake. It's not going to be that like the Oscars, but we do want to be, you can make a little bit of show out of it. Can't we? But if you have, like, if you now have like products where you're like, ooh, that is my absolute favorite product, and it fills all these criteria, and it's just shout it out, and I will quickly see if it's on the list, and otherwise we can add it.
What gives you that drop-down menu?
It's on there. On there.
D2C. It's not on there.
It's not on there. Okay.
It's been recently upgraded.
Can you add document viewer on there? D2C allows you to take Plone FormGen submitted forms and dump them into a actual Plone content type where you can use workflows and other things on it. It's pretty nice. It mirrors the fields from your form into the content type.
But
Collective.Google Analytics is very cool. You can really instrument your site with it and see what is going on in a way you could never see just simply looking at the Google Analytics for your site. One of my favorite examples is you can do something like instrument a form so that you can see if people are failing on the form. You can instrument the errors messages on the form so you can see whether error messages are popping up. So you can, after a while, begin to figure out that maybe we ought to accept date input in any format because people are constantly failing in inputting dates.
That's cool.
any more? What?
For what it's worth, that product is merged into Plone 4.3, so you don't need that on 4.3.
Collective syndication is, I think, just upgrade to 4.3. It's great.
It never will be.
I don't think it ever will be.
But actually, Plone FormGen would right now be exactly my example of a product you should not install because it is very hard to think of things that Plone Help Center does that Plone does not do out of the box now. Plone Help Center was created in a day when Plone didn't do those things. Plone does them now, and you know, if you think you need Plone Help Center for a reason other than that you installed it years ago, you may not have investigated all the things Plone does out of the box.
What about collective.reCAPTCHA? For adding like CAPTCHAs to Plone FormGen. Yeah, if you have Plone FormGen installed with it, it works out of the box too.
In fact, David, you put that in.
Rock? What?
Wasn't that merged into Plone App Theming?
Theming.
Is that what allows you to do
Dot plugins or
JBot inside? Ooh, bad idea, though. We don't really want to promulgate that as a good practice. Yeah, easy, but maybe a trap for that. We can talk about that later.
This is just a short list. It doesn't mean you gotta go on there. We're gonna check against the criteria and see if it's batshit
Right.
crazy
And I'll
anyway.
Theming plugins is one word, not a dot.
Oh. I thought people love namespaces.
I think it was on
We have EEA.star, basically. Okay, we'll look at it. Content, what? Yeah, I use it a lot, and I wish it wasn't necessary. No, it will be. Will be a behavior as soon as we get to dexterity. I'm anxiously awaiting that. And then there it's just a behavior that's on news images, but nobody will stop you from pulling the same behavior on a page, and you're done. In Portlet? Feed mixer, okay. But yeah, collective lead image is, functionality should have been in, maybe in core, but opinions diverse. But the product itself has many issues. But okay, and thankfully it is now, it will become a dexterity behavior. That's already working in Plone app content types, and it's how it should be. Sort of like, I get to decide as an integrator whether I want an image not only with my news, but also with my page. Ooh, that might be difficult.
It wouldn't be complicated if it was in core, but
I think that's on there. Yes.
An easy slideshow?
I think most of the slide thingies were on there, yeah.
I would say collective stats. I'm not sure. Does anyone use that? I'm absolutely shocked that no one uses that. Sure. You use it? So it's only the developer?
I mean, it doesn't mean anything directly. The integrator didn't pick it up.
Well, when it says that request took 40 seconds, it's like,
And there's no front end to it.
Excel.
Although I want to do it myself, we don't need to debate this here.
products that cron for Plone.
No.
No, you know like that? Something like it?
Use cron jobs, or let's figure a way of
Or clock servers?
points or something.
Oh, that's what it uses as a clock server.
Yeah. Or just regular cron jobs or run scripts.
Shall I, won't
Yeah,
I?
but then you gotta,
I
like,
actually
pass,
agree on the general principle that you shouldn't put stuff in Zope that operating systems do since at least 30 years without fault and hiccup. So, and there are build-out extensions that will actually do that for you, and those are quite easy to work for, also for integrators. They can run a build-out, and having a cron job in Zope is insane if you're on any kind of Linuxy, Unixy environment. Would be my opinion.
It could be a documentation issue.
Yes. Some cron thingy.
We got 2 minutes to lightning talks here.
Oh, we have 2 minutes. It's on there. It's on the list.
Is image editor on there?
Image editor is on there as well.
So this is not a product, but if I go to the Plone product site, the most prominent thing I see is experimental releases. And to me, as an integrator, this is the most irrelevant thing. I would like to have there the thing that's the latest release for one.
Ye-
And see, should I be using this or not?
Yeah, that is not for this list, unfortunately. That is a UI thing for Plone.org.
Right,
It will be noted.
Submit a bug report on Plone Software Center.
Okay, I think we are running out of time because also I think Kim had thought that we would all teleport instantly from this room back to the other one, which unfortunately the technology hasn't been quite perfected. I would like to thank you all for your input. This will go on, and remember, if you're an integrator and you're sort of like, yes, I have this mean streak in me and I actually want to judge other people's work, we will be convening a jury, and we'll be constructive, of course, in what we say, but I think it is important for the integrators and also for the add-on developers to present a much better list, and having a top 50 might be forcing the issue, but we need to do something to say, dear integrators, we love you, we have this easily accessible list, and this is what you should be using, and if you have very specific needs, it won't be on the top 50, but we have 800 more products, go search, but these are like the common use cases, and this is common opinion on the best way to deal with that. And I hope, yeah, we will have a little ceremony or something in Brasilia to get this list out in a proper way. Thank you very much.